So hello folks, this is David Jameson with the Aiken-Chamber of Commerce, and we are at Ask the Expert. As we've done in the past, because it's so important to keep track of when this was recorded, today is Wednesday, August the 5th, 2020. And our special guest today is Dr. Gregory Smith. And Dr. Smith currently is the medical director of the Aiken-Barnwell Mental Health Center, but he has a much longer background than that. And I'd like to say welcome, Dr. Smith, and could you tell us about yourself? What's your background?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Hopefully everybody can hear me fairly well. If you can't, let me know. I'm actually from Rome, Georgia, but I've been in the Aiken-Augusta area for many, many years since I started medical school here back in 1979. So I finished up medical school at MCG back in '83 and did my psychiatry residency training and chief residency at Medical College of Georgia and finished up all that training here in the area as well. Since that time, I've done many different things in mental health, which has been a lot of fun. I've done work with both state systems in Georgia and South Carolina, with the VA, with SRS, doing evaluations for SRS and the federal government in the past. And then finally, I sort of settled into my niche after doing some private practice of working with the Department of Mental Health and for the state, and I've really enjoyed that. Been doing that since about 1991, and full-time since 1993. So a lot of years with the Department of Mental Health here in the state, and really, really enjoy that, especially working with folks that are chronically mentally ill, that are dealing with challenges like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and things of that sort. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, kind of where I've come from and what I've been doing for the past several years, many years.
Well, it sounds like a very distinguished career and very interesting how you've helped people for so many years. If no one's told you, I'll say we appreciate what you're doing to help folks.
Thank you.
So it's been 6 months. It's been 24 weeks or so since COVID came to America. And for many folks, the world has really turned upside down in these months. Hope and a desire that if it was coming, that it would come, it would get here quick, it would do whatever it had to do and be gone, and we could get back to normal. But we're not finding that right this minute.
Right.
And how are you seeing this affect people at home and in the workplace?
Well, as you said, this is a really different kind of a crisis for us. If you've lived in the Georgia and Carolina area for very many years, of course, we've dealt with things like hurricanes, which we just had a small brush with, other kinds of disasters, natural disasters, man-made disasters. But usually what you've seen, and over my career, what I've seen working in disaster work, is something happens, it's an acute event, we have a response to it, we go through several stages, we get through it, and we move on. And we usually know sort of what to expect, how we're going to feel, what we have to do to get past those traumatic situations. This has been really different. And one of the things that people have told me and that I keep seeing over and over and over again is that there is so much uncertainty here. We're not really sure how bad this is going to be, for how long, when it's going to end, and if and when we're going to go back to normal, what we thought of as normal before. But it's been very, very stressful for a lot of people. And as you mentioned, with people having to stay home, with the school situation that we're all in the middle of right now, trying to figure out how to send kids back to school, with whether you can work at home or you can return to your place of work, it impacts us across the board. And not only impacting people that I see as patients, but myself, my family, my coworkers, my friends, my family, everyone else that I come in contact with has been impacted by this pandemic. And I know all of you have felt this the same way too. So it's been a little different in that sense, in that this is an ongoing kind of a stress. We don't know exactly what to expect, when it's going to be over, and when it is over, if we're going to be back to what we consider normal.
I think that what I'm seeing out in the business community is, of course, the business community, some businesses are actually thriving during this time and have plenty of businesses. Others are in a point of a lot of anxiety. I know that there's some businesses that, just by the nature of the kind of business they are, they haven't been allowed to reopen. They might have been in this business and have maybe they created this business 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and all of a sudden, through no fault of their own, they're seeing everything crumble under them. What are a couple of techniques that business owners and managers could use to relieve some of that anxiety?
Well, I think what they have to consider is, can you, to use a term that everybody has heard lately, can you pivot in some way? Can you decide to continue to run your business that you already have built in a different way? And that's what we're finding in mental health. That's why I'm talking to you now from an office upstairs in my house instead of from an office at the mental health center where I usually work. I'm doing the same type of work that I've done for 30 odd years, but I'm doing it in a different place with different technology, different ways to connect with people that I wouldn't have even thought about 6 months to a year ago. So I think a lot of folks that are in the business world, I would think, need to say, okay, can I continue to provide the same services I've always provided? First of all, do I want to continue that? And if so, how do I pivot to provide those in a different way? Can I utilize technology? Can I use physical and social distancing and still provide the same personal service? Can I do things telephonically by the computer? Can I use things like Microsoft Teams or Skype or different things of that sort? And then that's sort of the nuts and bolts part of it. The other part of it is, I think, the emotional part of it as well, is that if you have employees especially, how do you support your employees and try to build them up so that they can continue to work and connect with each other and continue to function as a team? We've had a lot of talks about that in our business and at the mental health center with 80 to 100 odd people. How do we stay connected, supervise our folks, talk to our folks that take direction from us, I guess, have meetings with them, supervise them, and things of that sort, plus support each other. That's something I think that everybody has to think about as well emotionally.
How do you react, or how do you advise people to take all of this information that's coming at us from hundreds of different sources, it feels like, and it ranges from there's no problem to we might not make it through tomorrow.
Right.
How do you help people understand how to sort through that and not let all that, not get so wrapped up in it that it pulls you down, that it brings you to a point of depression where you can't operate?
That's an excellent question. And again, I talk to patients about this every single day, and I try to practice what I preach here. So one thing I would do right off the top is don't try to keep on top of everything all day, every day, all day long. Because if you do that, if you keep a tab open on your browser all day, if you're constantly looking at a newspaper site, if you're trying to keep up with everything minute by minute, hour by hour, every day, it will overwhelm you. It's just too much. Like you said, there's too many places, too much information coming at you. It's just like a fire hose. So the first thing I always tell folks is keep up with the news, keep up with the numbers, keep up with what you need to know to run your business, to take care of your family, to do your job. But check in maybe once a day, maybe twice a day. Find a source that you trust, whether that's news on television, whether that's a local newspaper, national newspaper, some type of a streaming service that you use, doesn't matter. As long as it's something that you trust, that you feel like it's giving you good, solid information, check in with that maybe once or twice a day, get what you need, and then go about your life. Because if not, you do get very overwhelmed. So I think that's very important. The other thing is that this is an illness. This is a biological pandemic. You've heard this from several sources on the news elsewhere. This is a biological pandemic. It will end. All pandemics that we've had before this have ended. We don't know exactly when, and we don't know exactly how, but it is a biological pandemic. So even though people are really concerned about religion, about politics, about other things that are impacted by this pandemic, it's not really driven specifically by any of those things. And so we need to understand that. We see things through a framework, which may be our political framework, our religious framework, and that's fine. That helps us cope. But that's not what's driving this process in the world, and that's not what's going to solve the problems that we face that are brought on by this pandemic. That's very important.
So I was in a meeting yesterday, and I think there were probably 15 people there. It was an in-person meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I had two of those yesterday. The first time probably in a month I've been with
Wow.
people.
Yeah.
And I thrive off of the energy I get from people. Now, we were socially distanced, and because of the mask requirement, everyone kept on their mask in the room. And I felt like it changed some of the dynamics of the meeting. You couldn't see a full facial expression. You couldn't
Right.
see when somebody was smiling or not smiling. How do you think that affects people in the long run? This kind of half person, what I don't know what to call it, but I just know it was so obvious yesterday that it seemed to affect the discussion that we were having.
Yeah. Well, I think there are two sides to that coin. Again, that's an excellent observation, an excellent question, because it impacts all of us. If you're wearing a mask when you go outside or when you're around people or in groups, it definitely is going to impact how you get along with people, how you talk to people, how you interact with people. There are two sides to that coin. The first one is that we operate off cues, and we look at body language, and we look at eye contact, and we look at whether people are smiling or frowning or scowling at us or whatever they're doing. We get information from that, and you know that as a people person. That's the way you gauge whether your message is coming across, whether somebody's understanding you or not, whether you're making some type of progress, and that's important. So we have to learn how to do that in other ways. We have to learn to really communicate better verbally, to make sure that we do say what we mean, and that we mean what we say, and that people can hear that. That's very important. The body language is also important if you're in the room with someone, so that you can at least see that. Now, the other part of that I've seen in the work that I do, I've got a couple of computers set up here, I've got a phone set up here, other things. I'll often talk to a person on the phone and do a video chat with that person as I'm typing on my computer at the same time. That's very different from what I would do in my office when I'm talking with someone. But I found, interestingly, that when I talk to some of these folks on the phone, they actually are a little freer, especially if they can see me by video on the phone, with telling me things and talking to me about things that maybe they'd be a little bit more hesitant to do if they were actually sitting 6 feet away from me in my office. And I've been kind of surprised by that. You think that it would be the opposite.
Yeah, that's counterintuitive. What do you think causes that openness to appear?
Well, I think it's two things there again. I think that people, especially the people that already know me, that are patients that maybe I've been seeing for 20 or 25 years, they know they can talk to me because we have that pre-existing relationship face to face. The other part of it, the technology is a little bit protective. You can talk to someone, you can look away if you need to, you can stand up and walk away, you can turn that person off, you can turn your video off if you want to. So there's a little bit of a protective layer there, so if things get a little bit too hot and you really don't want to go there with that issue, you can always say, look, I can't do this, call me back on the phone, I need to stop for now, I'm going to have to go, take care of my child or whatever, and you can terminate that session, which is kind of an out if you need it. Yeah.
Now, I think you said earlier that you've been practicing telepsychiatry for some period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's a good resource, but how do you feel about the major problem that we have in this region, where we have a lot of the region that has no internet, no broadband service?
Exactly.
How are those people receiving help or receiving services from y'all during this time, if that's the case?
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of people do have very good internet access and can stream, have a lot of broadband, have a lot of bandwidth rather, and that's no problem. So just like we're talking now, they can see, you can see them, done deal, it's a good thing. The folks that don't have that, it's a bigger problem. So like when I'm talking with folks that are in our catchment area that are in Barnwood County, for instance, I know that most of the people that are on my schedule on a day when I'm going to see people in Barnwood County are probably not going to have video capability.
Mm-hmm.
If they have it, it's going to be very spotty, it's going to be very pixelated, we're going to have that jumping, stuttering, freezing kind of thing. And that's just not conducive, especially to doing mental health work. That just doesn't work, right? So we do a lot of phone connection. Not the best, not optimal, but at least it's better than texting or emailing back and forth, because you can hear the person and you can talk. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're doing for mental health is that we do have folks now, thank goodness, that had started doing services out in the field long before this pandemic hit. So we do have a couple of 3 different teams that actually go out in the community, can see people in their homes, and of course now appropriately socially distanced, usually outside with a mask, 6 feet, the whole deal that we need to do, obviously, but at their home, you know, where they live or where they work, or someplace where it's easy to get to them, so that they don't even have to come into the center if they don't have transportation. They don't have to worry about internet access. If they don't have that, we come to them. And that's been very, very good. That can be counseling services, social services, giving people injections that need injections, the whole gamut of services. So we're not just waiting on people to either call us, dial in, or come to the center. We're trying to go out to them and make sure there's not a disruption in that service during this whole process.
So during these last 6 months, has the Aiken-Barnwell Mental Health Center seen an uptick in requests for service? What's that been like?
It's kind of yes and no. What we found, and I'll answer that in a couple of ways. As far as in the clinic, we've seen that we didn't have as many people coming in for services, because what happened was, like a lot of people, we had to close some of our face-to-face in the building types of services. So there weren't as many people that might just wander in, come in as walk-ins, that want to ask for help like we could do in the past. We were having to be more judicious with that. So what we did was we actually physically distanced from ourselves, in a sense, in that we used one of our buildings that was down away from the main building, set up tents. We could see people outside. We could give injections. We could do evaluations there. We were sort of out in the open. Things were, were a little bit safer for everyone there. That's what happened the first few weeks to months of this pandemic. Now, in telepsychiatry, I noticed the same thing. I've been doing that for about 10 years in the emergency rooms around the state. We're in about 24, 25 emergency rooms. A lot of psychiatric patients, mental health patients, just did not come in. So, instead of doing hundreds of consults in a month, we might have done dozens of consults in a month. It went way, way down for a while. And it's just now starting to tick back up after these 6 months or so. I noticed this morning, as I looked at the queue in there, we had 15, 16, 17 consults waiting around the state. There may be times that we have none. So that's been a big thing. Now, at the mental health center, as of this week, as a matter of fact, we started opening back up slowly to where we're bringing people in. So say the folks that have chronic mental illness that need injections every 2 to 4 weeks, they have been coming into the center, into the building, seeing the nurses, and getting the services at the building. There are people that maybe, like you said before, don't have broadband access, can't do video chats, can't do stuff in the community by phone. So if those people are not being served the way they need to be, we're going to start bringing those folks back in first to make sure they get the help that they need, since they can't get it in those other fashions.
So we're kind of at the closing point of this now. I was wondering if you had a relaxation exercise or two that you could share with our viewers.
Yeah, one of the things that I like to have people do, they've heard about deep breathing and things like that. Often just kind of centering yourself for a few minutes, if you're at your office, if you're home, if you're working, is just literally take a minute or 2 or 5, if you have it, deep breaths, listen to some music that you like, turn away from your computer and your phone, just let yourself kind of de-stress for about 5 minutes. That often, even though it seems like a super simple thing, can really help to get your head back in the game. The other thing that I would ask that people do, especially if they're working from home, like I have been for 85% of the time here lately, is to get up, get away from the desk, go upstairs or downstairs, depending on where you are, go outside, get some fresh air, get yourself away from the place that you usually work and do something different for 10 or 15 minutes and take a break. You'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't, but you'd be surprised sometimes that you can be sitting in the same spot for 3 or 4 hours, working pretty hard and concentrating and never take a break. And you really need to do that to maintain your physical and your mental health as you work.
Well, that's some really good advice. Dr. Smith, we've had a great conversation. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk with us today. And I know all of our viewers will appreciate the information that you provided. This is David Jameson with Ask the Expert, and we're signing off. Good day.